Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Trebas Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Two Navy aircrew were pulled from the San Diego Bay after their fighter jet crashed into the harbor. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. They ejected before the jet crashed into the water this morning while trying to land at Naval Air Station North Island. KPBS military reporter Andrew Dyer has more from Shelter Island.
The EA-18 Growler crashed around 10:15 this morning right here near Shelter Island. The two aircrew on board were rescued by Good Samaritans in a boat and brought here to the Port of San Diego Harbor Police substation, where they were then taken to the hospital. The Navy says both are in stable condition.
Premier Coast Guard San Diego, how many people were on board the aircraft? Over.
I'm reporting 2, and we pulled 2 people out of the water.
It's San Diego Harbor Police, break, San Diego Harbor Police on 16. Who is the agency that pulled them out of the water?
Premier Sport Fishing out of H&M Landing.
The San Diego webcam channel on YouTube captured the radio traffic of the rescue. Navy crews have been out in the bay deploying booms to capture any debris or fuel. Harbor Police have closed parts of the bay near the crash site as well as Kellogg Beach in Point Loma. The Navy's investigating the crash but hasn't yet announced its plan to recover the jet. From Shelter Island, I'm Andrew Dyer, KPBS News.
An atmospheric river is expected to bring about 2 inches of rain to San Diego's inland valleys and up to 6 inches to the mountains by Friday. KPBS reporter Melissa May says some community members are thinking about last year's flooding as they prepare for this first big storm of the season.
The National Weather Service says the biggest threat from this storm in San Diego County is localized flooding in low-lying areas. The San Diego River could flood and close roads in the Fashion Valley area. The heaviest rainfall is expected Thursday night, starting around 8 p.m. Residents in Skyline are thinking about last year's flooding as they prepare for this storm.
We come into so we can take preventive measures because of what took place last year around about this time. And we recently had a drainage system put in, but just in case it doesn't work, we want to be ready.
That's Skyline resident Charles Demily and his wife Stacy. Their home wasn't damaged last year, but they aren't taking anything for granted.
Especially the way the insurance companies are now, I try to be on top of it to prevent anything from happening or having to get them involved.
If you live in District 4, you can come to the Martin Luther King Jr. Recreational Center, where they're handing out up to 10 free sandbags per person to help protect your home.
About a mile away is an area of Choyas Creek that flooded and damaged homes and businesses last year.
So what you're looking at here is the South Fork of Choyas Creek, one of the 2 branches that ends up down in San Diego Bay. And this was the site of major flooding on January 22nd.
Leslie Reynolds is the executive director of Groundwork San Diego. She says residents around the creek are traumatized from the flooding.
We do know that many people are still struggling. They're not back in their homes. They're still looking for funding and for insurance and so on and so forth. So it's still very catastrophic for lots and lots of families.
She says the watershed has been underinvested for decades. But the city of San Diego is now prioritizing maintenance for about 12 miles of the creek.
For the most part, you can see here that this is cleared of non-native vegetation and most of the trash and debris. They've done some widening. They have removed a lot of the things that will contribute to the flooding. But they're now working with the communities.
In anticipation of this storm, the city says they are placing no parking signs in flood-prone areas. SDG&E says it's increasing the number of field crews and equipment available should power outages occur. Melissa May, KPBS News.
Well, happy Wednesday, everyone. Heading into the weekend, I am tracking a rainy forecast for both Thursday and Friday, but overall it looks like it's going to be nice and sunny for your Saturday and Sunday. And then after that, I'm tracking a pretty nice stretch of weather as well as we head into next week. How nice is it going to be? I'll detail that updated forecast coming up.
Two of President Donald Trump's controversial cabinet picks faced important votes today. Tulsi Gabbard was confirmed as the Director of National Intelligence, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s nomination to lead the Department of Health and Human Services advanced to the next step in the process. People close to Trump were most concerned about Gabbard's confirmation chances. Prior to today's vote, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer urged members of both parties to vote against her confirmation.
I think most senators would agree there are better choices to lead national intelligence. You know what my guess is? If we had a secret ballot, Gabbard might get 10 votes and 40 against her.
We're greatly disappointed in any Republican who chooses willfully to vote against the president's exceptionally qualified cabinet nominees and picks to lead his America First administration.
And just one Republican voted against Gabbard's confirmation, former Senate GOP leader Mitch McConnell. Kennedy's confirmation vote is expected in the coming days. San Diego Congressman Scott Peters is now speaking out about executive orders that could hinder local scientists. That's weeks after the Trump administration suggested freezing federal funding and banning words that could threaten research. KPBS's Amita Sharma has details.
To the tune of nearly $1 billion, Peters' congressional district receives the most National Institutes of Health money in California. It is home to 4 world-class research institutions: UC San Diego, Scripps Research, the Salk Institute, and La Jolla Immunology. Their focus includes cancer treatments, drug discovery, vaccines, and immune disorders. The Trump administration announced funding cuts to NIH that would deprive researchers in California of $800 million. A week later, Peters and other congressional lawmakers fired off a letter to NIH urging it to reconsider. The effect is unclear, but Peters says at least it gets lawmakers' opposition on the record. Local scientists have questioned whether Peters and his congressional colleagues are even fighting to safeguard their funding. Peters says he is.
And we have the power of the purse, but the president signs off on it. He's not allowed to just change it on his own by fiat. So we are fighting back. I can't tell you if I were a scientist that I wouldn't be worried.
He says his power, though, is limited.
Let's just remember, Amita, that the United States of America elected Donald Trump to be the president. They elected a majority of people in the Senate and the House who apparently are not going to cross him. So we're in a tough position here.
In the end, he says he believes the courts will hold the Trump administration in check on spending cuts to science. A federal judge has ordered the administration to delay NIH cuts, calling them flagrantly unlawful. Amita Sharma, KPBS News.
The El Cajon City Council approved a resolution that says that they want to help the federal government deport people with violent criminal convictions, but will continue to follow California's sanctuary laws. The council voted 3-2 in support. The resolution also directs city staffers to ask the California Attorney General's office for guidance, asking how much they can cooperate with the federal law enforcement. The cost of living is heating up, according to the latest Consumer Price Index data released today. It comes as Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell testified on Capitol Hill for the second day in a row. Ivan Rodriguez joins us with details on Powell's testimony.
The January Consumer Price Index coming in hot.
On just about every metric, this was a miss with respect to what we were looking for in this main gauge of inflation at the retail level.
Egg prices shot up 15.2% from December to January, the fastest increase that index has seen since 2015, according to the report. But it's not just eggs.
You had food, you had energy, you have shelter, you have used cars, you have motor vehicle insurance. This report indicates that inflation trends are worsening.
Inflation now moving in the opposite direction of the Federal Reserve's 2% target.
We want to make more progress on inflation, and we think our policy rate is in a good place.
During 2 days of congressional testimony, Fed Chair Jerome Powell said officials aren't in a hurry to reduce interest rates further, not what investors and potential home buyers were hoping to hear.
once we lower rates and kind of rates return to a lower level, mortgage rates will come down. I don't know when that'll happen.
Although the Fed doesn't directly control mortgage rates, it does influence them. The 30-year fixed-rate mortgage now averages 6.89%, according to Freddie Mac. For now, bank rates Mark Hamrick suggests Americans focus on saving.
One of the benefits of a high interest rate environment is that one can still command a decent return on savings in a high-yield savings account that surpasses the recent rate of inflation.
I'm Ivan Rodriguez reporting.
San Diego County is projecting a budget deficit of nearly $140 million next fiscal year, facing possible program cuts from Washington and uncertainties on how tariffs would affect the regional economy. Supervisor Tara Lawson-Remer wants to explore options to raise revenue. She says the county is trying to get ahead of the situation and make a plan, which could include a sales tax hike.
We're being a lot more open-minded. We're going to have focus groups. We're going to do some community surveys, maybe some community forums, and just really find out what people's priorities are and what trade-offs people are willing to make given what's going on across the country.
Lawson-Remer has introduced a resolution to instruct the county's chief administrative officer to conduct a study and report back to the board on some possibilities for raising revenue. The Board of Supervisors will vote on this at their next meeting in 2 weeks. We've heard a lot about the city of San Diego's daunting budget deficit for next year. In our Why It Matters segment, Voice of San Diego's Scott Lewis has some bad news about this year, too.
It's not just next year. City leaders are struggling to make ends meet this year, too, and it's causing some tension. The city is facing what's called a structural deficit. That means it's set up to spend more than it is set up to collect. $108 million more this year, in particular, according to a recent projection. So now the city is scrambling to get more money. For example, it urgently doubled parking meter fees last month. The city council and an employee union blasted the mayor for not doing more. Here was Michael Zuchet, the leader of the largest union of city employees, at a recent budget committee meeting.
What we come profoundly disappointed about today is the complete lack of any movement whatsoever on the expenditure side. Your independent budget analysts and MEA for 3 months have been expressing that we have to get going on cutting or it's only going to get worse.
We're supposed to have a balanced budget, but it was thrown off because of 2 main reasons. 1, people aren't buying as much stuff and paying sales taxes. 2, police and fire worked more overtime than planned. Councilmember Kent Lee said to make up for the loss, there likely will have to be cuts to libraries and parks.
What's really daunting and frustrating is we all know that's going to happen, and yet we're sitting here with no clarity on when or how that might be delivered.
And remember, this was a discussion about the fiscal year ending in June. Next year's projected deficit could be much higher, as high as $250 million. The mayor's staff said they will present a reshaping of the city's organizational chart with major cuts at the end of this month. I'm Scott Lewis for Voice of San Diego, and that's why it matters.
Voice of San Diego is one of our partners for the Public Matters Initiative. You can learn more at kpbs.org/Public Matters. A 10-year-old community garden in Oceanside is closing down because of a difference in beliefs and values. Community Roots Farm was not only a place to grow food, it's also been the site of events celebrating different cultures and communities. But KPBS North County reporter Tanya Thorne says the church that owns the land doesn't support some of those events.
There were once chickens, fruitful gardens, and community.
Lots of chickens around this place.
To be able to have a place where anyone can come, no matter their socioeconomic status, how they woke up feeling that day, their gender identity, whatever it is, they know that they can come to this space and be nourished. Not only physically with food, but also mentally, socially, culturally.
Bianca Bonilla is the organizer of Community Roots Farm. For 10 years, she has overseen the gardens and community events.
And everyone is always so surprised at how much you can do on an acre of land, right? It's not only the amount of food we grew, which was thousands of pounds, tens of thousands of pounds every single year that went out into our community, pesticide-free, local produce, but it was all of the people that were here.
But she doesn't own that 1 acre. It's leased from Shepherd of the Valley Lutheran Church. And after a change in church leadership, the farm is nothing but dead weeds and dirt.
About 2 years ago, Shepherd of the Valley Lutheran Church, there with the Missouri Synod, and they installed a new pastor, Joe Luckemeyer, and he made it very clear to our organization that he did not approve of several of our activities and our communications.
Bonilla says concerns from the church came up when the farm posted support for the LGBTQ community on their social media. Those concerns grew.
Did not approve of our summer solstice event that we had this year, stating that it is a pagan rituals that we were holding. And then our Dia de los Muertos event are also deemed non-acceptable to be devil worshiping.
When it was time to renew their lease, the church told Bonilla they would be enforcing a condition on their lease. All events and signage would need 30-day approval by the church.
They made it very clear that Dia de los Muertos and many of our communications would not be approved. Thus, we decided that this was no longer a safe space for our community. We could not forego our values and making sure that the people that we serve, our community, we want to make sure that they feel safe.
Pastor Joel Luckemeyer and the Shepherd of the Valley Lutheran Church declined an interview, but sent over a statement saying the farm's activity has expanded beyond growing and providing produce to advancing causes, which conflict with the biblical teachings of our congregation. The church also says it offered a new agreement, including event approval to make sure the property would not host events that expressly conflict with our mission and confession of faith. And the church notes, the farm has chosen not to enter into a new lease.
Their values are firm and so are ours. Their boundaries are firm and so are ours. You know, the protection of our most vulnerable communities, of our BIPOC, LGBTQIA communities, our immigrant communities, that is the most important to us, that they feel safe.
The loss of the farm leaves a larger gap for the community that frequented the space. It's the loss of access to an open green space, fresh vegetables, friendships, and acceptance.
These kinds of issues we're seeing on the media on a grand scale, right? We're seeing these tensions, and here we are living it on this micro scale. And in conversations, you know, I would say, like, if we can do this, if we can work this out, anybody can, right? There's hope. Like, how are we going to carry this?
Open green space is scarce, so Bonilla plans on carrying the mission of Community Roots Farm in a new direction, in a warehouse she is calling the Plant Lab.
We're going to have workshops there and community space and community building. But I think most importantly, it's going to be a space, collaborative, safe space for our BIPOC, immigrant, and LGBTQI community.
The Plant Lab in Oceanside will be open to the public later this year. Tanya Thorne, KPBS News.
The power of investigative journalism is making puppy mill animals safer in California. In response to an in-depth Los Angeles Times investigation, new legislation has been introduced in Sacramento. Senator Tom Umberg, along with Assembly member Steve Bennett and Mark Berman, jointly introduced 3 bills sponsored by the San Diego Humane Society.
Hearing how really unscrupulous actors are getting around California's laws to import puppies and cats and rabbits from puppy mills in other states and lie to Californians about where those animals came from, leading to these animals coming in with diseases, passing away, dying far too soon or having extraordinary medical bills. We have to shut this down.
So here's a breakdown of those bills. SB 312 mandates that dog importers submit health certificates electronically to the California Department of Food and Agriculture within 10 days of shipment and makes them publicly available. AB 506 voids contracts between California consumers and online pet brokers that require a non-refundable deposit and or fail to disclose the source of a dog or cat prior to paying a deposit. AB 519 ends pet brokering in California by defining brokers as any person or business that makes a profit by selling animals bred and raised by another. So all three measures will be heard in policy committees in March or April. California's FAIR Plan has run out of cash to pay for Los Angeles wildfire claims. Now it's getting a $1 billion bailout. The fires last month destroyed nearly 7,000 structures in Pacific Palisades and more than 9,000 in Altadena. So far, the FAIR Plan has paid out $914 million to homeowners without private insurance coverage. The $1 billion bailout will likely raise the cost of home insurance for Californians. The state insurance commissioner said new rules should prevent more insurance carriers from leaving California, and that should help stabilize the market. Some fire-scarred areas in and around Los Angeles are bracing for the most significant storm there in more than a year, stoking fears of life-threatening debris flow and mudslides. Laura Aguirre shows us how some residents and county officials are preparing.
I think everybody needs to be aware and ready.
Ready for the massive third wave of a powerful winter blitz that's brought snow, ice, rain, flash flooding, and power outages to much of the central and eastern U.S. since Tuesday. In a matter of hours, those same conditions are expected to envelop most of the western half of the nation through Saturday. And in Southern California, that poses an especially dangerous threat.
The whole hillside behind me has been denuded from the fire, and it already slid a little bit, and now we're preparing that it's going to slide a whole bunch more.
Residents in fire-scarred areas around Los Angeles County are bracing for the worst. Many are sandbagging and shoring up gaps in plastic barriers.
If you are living in a location where there is a slope behind your house and it is burned, we want to hear from you.
LA County officials today urging those in potential mudslide zones to reach out so crews can assess risk and install temporary debris flow barriers before the storm hits. For weeks, the state has been cleaning and expanding stormwater and debris drainage systems along with other preparations, and evacuation orders have been issued in high-risk areas.
Storms can bring sudden and severe conditions that make staying back home extremely risky.
Damaging high wind gusts are also expected.
Make sure your flashlights have good batteries in them and check your generators and your pumps that they're all working. And they usually recommend 3-day supply of food and water for your family.
I'm Laura Aguirre for KPBS News.
The rain will be sticking around here as we head into tonight. Overnight lows will be in the 50s with low clouds near the coast and a few isolated shower chances here during the overnight hours. Most of the rainfall will be across the coast. Overnight temperatures primarily in the 50s. 53 tonight for Oceanside and Camp Pendleton, 57 in downtown San Diego. We'll see a little bit more clearing here off to the east. So for the desert and the mountains, we will see some clearing, but there will be some rain chances there across the mountains as well. Future track radar is showing that as we head into your early Thursday morning, most of the heavy rainfall is going to stay up to the north. We'll still see some scattered showers here across far southern parts of California, and then that rainfall is going to persist. We'll see heavier bands of rain moving their way inland here during the afternoon hours, but by about midday, we will see a little bit of a break in the heavier rainfall before another round moves its way in late Thursday. Here's a snapshot at 5 o'clock local time. This wall of water is going to be approaching from the north, riding right down the interstate, and we'll see the heaviest rainfall in the forecast late Thursday after sunset, heading into late Thursday, early parts of Friday. But then as we head into Friday morning, some lingering rain, but overall the heaviest will be out by Friday afternoon. So here's the overall setup for Thursday. Most of the heavy rainfall will be for central parts of California, but overall it's going to be a wet forecast here for Thursday. Temperature-wise, we'll be in the low to mid 60s, some rain-cooled 60s here across the region for us. And then on Friday, some lingering rainfall, but overall the rain will start to taper off. Your 5-day outlook here for the coast, tracking rain chances there for Thursday and Friday. Here comes that sunshine starting on Saturday. Overnight lows will be a mix of 40s. Afternoon highs will be a mix of 60s, even some upper 60s there on Sunday. For the inland forecast, we'll be watching out for the rain chances Thursday and Friday. Highs back in the 70s by Sunday. For the mountain forecast, the rain will stick around with some snow flurries in the higher elevations, but then after that, we'll clear out for the weekend. And the same thing for the desert with temperatures in the mid-70s.
And here's another look at today's top stories. A Navy jet crashed into the San Diego Bay while trying to land at Naval Air Station North Island. The EA-18 Growler went into the water near Shelter Island around 10:15 this morning. The Port of San Diego Harbor Police Department says the 2 crew on board ejected and were rescued from the water by Good Samaritans in a boat. They were taken to the hospital. The Navy is investigating the crash but hasn't yet announced its plan to recover the jet. Last year's flooding is on many people's minds as the first major storm of the year moves into our region. The city says workers have been clearing storm drains and street sweeping to reduce debris from entering waterways. Recreational centers are offering up to 10 free sandbags per person to prepare for possible flooding. San Diego Congressman Scott Peters is speaking out about executive orders that could hinder local scientists. The Trump administration announced funding cuts to National Institutes of Health that would deprive researchers in California of $800 million. A week later, Peters and other congressional lawmakers fired off a letter to NIH urging it to reconsider. A federal judge has ordered the administration to delay the cuts.
I'm Jeff Bennett. Tonight on the NewsHour, the Trump administration pulls U.S. support for admitting Ukraine into NATO. That's at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
And as always, you can find all of our stories from tonight on our website, kpbs.org. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. I hope you have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.